united. We'll never be divided.
It's one of the most polarizing issues facing our state and country today. And with a renewed presidential push to detain and deport undocumented immigrants.
Since taking office, my administration has launched the most sweeping border and immigration crackdown in American history.
Texas leaders are also looking for more enforcement opportunities, they say, to combat crime.
To support that mission, I've ordered Texas state agencies to assist the Trump administration to arrest, jail, and deport illegal immigrants.
No, we need to see your warrant.
Sweeping moves critics say hurt some communities.
This distrust can lead to decreased crime reporting, reduced witness cooperation,
and affect our economy, healthcare, and schools.
We understand that we need to reform our immigration system.
Through multiple reports on air and online, we take a closer look at Texas immigration impact in a new Trump era. In recent months, we've seen detainment centers popping up city after city. Immigration raids and mass arrests are making headlines. Fear for some, policy decisions for others. This topic is divisive and frankly too big to tackle every angle. But we've put our entire team to work to tell the stories of how the shift is shaping Texas, often in agreements quietly signed between federal and local law enforcement agencies. To understand that aspect, we started our digging far from the capital city, in an area where such arrangements have existed for years. So we're heading about 6 hours outside of Austin, which is West Texas, right along the border. It's among the most desolate stretches along the U.S.-Mexico border.
Border checkpoint?
Yeah, I think it is a border checkpoint. The last bit of civilization, 25 miles from the Rio Grande. The only highway around, teeming with border patrol at every turn.
Hello? Gentlemen, immigration inspection. Everybody on board United States citizen?
Terrell County, Texas is one of the least populated counties in America. So sparse, the county seat isn't even incorporated. Sanderson's city limit, population 654. For years, residents have been quietly conscious of their proximity to politics.
A lot of sympathy for people who want to better their lives, but probably an anxiety of the violence coming through here. Also aware of the great poverty that is pushing people into all of our country.
But now, under President Trump's new administration, they're bracing for change as some local law enforcement predicts a rise in illegal immigration here soon.
We need to protect our borders, but I also, recognize that everybody's human.
It comes as federal and state enforcement efforts increase elsewhere, potentially pushing passage to this rough part of the border.
I think it's a tough place to safely cross into the United States here. It's a harsh environment.
Do you get questions from tourists about immigration?
Yes, I urge them to go to our cemetery. We have a section that is all unlabeled mounds of where immigrants have been found, and they've buried them. They couldn't find family, they couldn't find any ID on them.
Still, most here never come that close to encountering anyone on their own.
It's definitely a topic of discussion, mostly with the ranchers having migrants coming through their property.
The sprawling ranches between the town and the river are often the first to see signs of those who survive.
This is a real hot spot right here. It leads into a canyon to where they can kind of, conceal themselves.
Crossings are currently down here and along the entire southern border.
We had to pile up rocks because it's such a vulnerable place for a predator to get in, and what they do is they cut it, the coyote comes through and then lifts up one side of it, and they just come scampering under here.
This isolated acreage is one place with evidence of a recent increase in activity.
What kind of challenges does it present for you when the fence does get broken or torn up?
I can lose my guard dogs, the goats can get out, and these animals can get in a lot easier. It takes an army to fix it like it was when it was brand new. And it's just, it's devastating to me, heartbreaking.
I anticipated we would start seeing more activity out here because those urban environments where we see the majority of those apprehensions, I figured it would push them this way. But we had a group 2 days ago that was detected on some of their camera systems. It's been so windy, a lot of times it'll blow out any dirt footprints or any sign that's left behind by the people. We often rely on our landowners to be our eyes and ears in these locations.
Their cooperation is also how Sheriff Thaddeus Cleveland accesses this private land, some of the most remote on the border. Once through, he and his 2 deputies rely on Border Patrol and their state partners to help them find and catch anyone here illegally.
It's really all of us working together, Texas Department of Public Safety, Highway Patrol troopers, Parks and Wildlife game wardens, and then Texas military forces that have been down here deployed in the county. So Terrell County, we have 54 miles of border with Mexico. We'll go on south of here to go down to the river, see an area that's actually utilized by illegal aliens to make their entry in the United States.
So where are we right now?
So this particular area is an area that we have seen a recent uptick in people crossing the border illegally, specifically right here at what we call Bone Water. We're at the Rio Grande River where there's some water for people to drink, but once they get north of this area, if they don't know where they're going or they don't have a guide that's leading them the way, then they may not have water for days. From that point, they can either be picked up there by a smuggler who's coming from another part of Texas or even coming from another state.
A former Border Patrol agent himself, Sheriff Cleveland has helped recover bodies in the desert and rescued others, lost and barely alive.
¿Cómo? Mi estómago. ¿Qué? ¿No traes tantita agua que me regales? ¿Cómo? Agua. Sí, yo tengo agua.
We saw 6 backpackers carrying the big backpacks. They're drug runners.
No, they're not.
But even with longtime locals, he says there's often still a misconception about who's crossing here.
We haven't had a drug seizure in 5 years.
Well, what the hell are they? What?
Clothes, food.
What has drug seizure been like here?
I can look anybody in the eye and tell them that it's not crossing here.
So who are most of the people who are crossing in your county?
Out here, we typically catch accompanied juveniles. That means they're with their father, their brother, an uncle, something like that. But again, the vast majority are people no different than us that are coming north to work. But I've also apprehended those that do have criminal records. They're those that committed crimes in the United States, and of course, that's what this administration said they were going to target.
One tool Terrell County has to detect that, an agreement with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. It's called a 287G, a program allowing local and state agencies to enforce federal immigration law. Here specifically in the county jail.
It allows a deputy to get training, and then we'll have a computer system that they can enroll people that we catch to see if they've been previously apprehended and to find out where they're from. And if they're not from the United States, then we can hold that person for ICE.
There are 3 types of 287G agreements that local law enforcement agencies can sign with ICE. The first is the jail enforcement model, which is what exists here in Terrell County. And then you have the warrant service officer program and the task force model. We break down the differences, plus explain why several Texas agencies are signing on after President Trump took office again, and why some are bowing out after signing their initial agreements. Coming up.
Sir, this is an executive order entitled Protecting the American People Against Invasion, which again deals with the southern border and the unprecedented admission of illegal aliens across the southern border.
On his first day back in the White House, President Trump signed an extensive executive order paving the way, in part, for more 287G agreements across the country. During his first term, dozens of Texas law enforcement agencies signed such agreements with ICE. But the state saw no new agreements during the Biden administration. That quickly changed during the first 100 days of Trump's second term. Following the state attorney general's lead, at least 40 Texas entities voluntarily signed or renewed 287G partnerships in that short span, with more awaiting approval.
The chair now lays out Senate Bill 8, and recognizes its author, our colleague Senator Schwertner, to explain the measure.
And this legislative session, some state lawmakers, like Senator Charles Schwertner, have pushed proposals to require other agencies to sign up soon.
Remember, Senate Bill 8 mandates that county sheriffs in counties over 100,000 population enter into a written agreement with ICE under Section 287G of the Immigration and Nationality Act.
We'll open public testimony on Senate Bill 8.
SB 8 will force our local law enforcement officials to shift their focus away from keeping our communities safe to go play the role of federal ICE agents.
And it's not their sole job either. They'll be doing other jobs because they're not constantly on the ICE machine.
Obviously, this 287G program is all about safety and protection for the people of this country.
This law amounts to selling our local law enforcement to the federal government.
A 287G agreement essentially deputizes local, county, or state police to be force multipliers for ICE, using 3 models. Jail enforcement lets agencies interrogate people they've already arrested to determine immigration status, then issue ICE detainers. The warrant service officer model lets officers make immigration-related arrests of people already in their jail themselves. And the recently revived task force model allows officers to enforce immigration laws during their routine duties in their communities. Additional responsibilities, some immigration experts say, increasingly move beyond the typical roles in local policing.
It's just an added layer of nuance that they're going to have to operate within very efficiently. And the stakes of error in immigration enforcement are very high.
What implications constitutionally exist when something like that happens?
So the primary constitutional concerns that are very predictable are things like equal protection and due process. What local enforcement of federal immigration law creates is an issue that some individuals might be treated differently under the law because they look like an immigrant, whatever that might mean.
When local law enforcement is perceived as an extension of federal immigration enforcement, it erodes trust within immigrant communities.
It sows seeds of disengagement and disconnection.
In a country that's built on immigration, I ask you all to think twice about the intent behind this legislation.
There were people in the hearing that clearly didn't want this bill. They talked about the way that it might impact the immigrant communities here in Texas. What do you think about that?
Well, I asked them if they want criminal aliens running around and causing violence and crime against citizens that they know, Texans they know. We've heard stories after stories ever since Biden has done his open border policy of criminal aliens that have been arrested and released and go on to commit even more heinous crimes.
There were hundreds of thousands of illegal crossings a month, and virtually all of them, including murderers, drug dealers, gang members.
Republican leaders nationally and in Texas have highlighted individual emotional cases.
No, we need to see your warrant.
When justifying their pitch for increased overall immigration enforcement.
12-year-old Jocelyn Ungery.
A brilliant 22-year-old nursing student named Lakin Riley.
She was brutally raped and murdered by 2 illegal immigrants with ties to Trinidad.
Stolen from us by a savage illegal alien gang member.
What do you see as the reality when it comes to those arrests?
When we're talking about the crime of illegal immigration, it is a crime of entry, of being here. I think the idea that we're going to gather up all these criminals, all these undocumented immigrants, it acts as if all these people are doing these terrible things to threaten public safety. There are plenty of studies that show that immigrants in the United States commit crimes at lower rates than U.S. citizens.
One of the latest such studies from the National Institute of Justice last year specifically examined Texas Department of Public Safety data, finding undocumented immigrants were arrested at less than half the rate of native-born U.S. citizens for violent and drug-related crimes. When we asked 287G participating agencies in Texas to provide details on their arrests and complaints about the program, some declined to provide any records and, pointing to a rule in their agreements, referred us to ICE for information. ICE also declined our interview requests, saying in a statement simply, "There's no way that all these operations could take place without our state and local partners." Still, we found in recent years some participating agencies, like the Burnett County Sheriff's Office, became inactive with their 287G agreements, telling us they weren't getting much out of it, and citing the cost, training time, and resources as challenges. Another in Central Texas, neighboring Williamson County, where Senator Schwertner lives, discontinued its agreement altogether after 2021. Williamson County Sheriff's Office is one that currently has no agreement. What do you think about that being your home county?
Well, I've spoken to the sheriff actually over the weekend, and I think we are on the same page regarding the need to enforce our immigration laws.
Is there a possibility that Williamson County could enter into a new 287G agreement in the future?
I would say we're considering that now. The main concern I had was the expenses that would fall back on our county as far as sending an officer to the East Coast for a month for training. Who's taking their place, who's doing their work here at home, so we're paying someone else overtime to fill in. And that was the concerns that I would have, burdens that would be on the county.
Needless to say, this could potentially put a very harsh monetary strain on our budgets every year.
It cost me $10,000 per jailer that are 287G certified.
But we're currently in the process of applying to become a 287G county. I do want to do what's right and try to protect the citizens in the state of Texas to the best of my ability.
So the concern is that this would in effect become an unfunded mandate?
It could be, yes ma'am. That's the association's worry. We support the program, we support removing criminal aliens. Please know that.
Yes, this is a mandate, and I will defend that day and night.
Well, that is a concern. Obviously, anytime we ask our local counties to do something, there is a cost associated with it. But it's defrayed by this grant program. And really, in my opinion, it's an obligation of local law enforcement to enforce immigration laws.
Is that too much to ask? And what amount of money is worth that? That's the question I think we should be asking ourselves.
It's kind of been an underutilized program.
Right, most definitely. So when they're initially encountered, they're arrested and turned over to Border Patrol. So there's not a huge need.
Back in Terrell County, Sheriff Cleveland has so many other border resources and partners, he hasn't had to rely on his 287G agreement, but says he's considering renewing its use if border crossings and crime increase.
I don't see the cartels just throwing up their arms and saying, okay, we give up, we're going away, we're not going to pass people or dangerous drugs. At some point, something's gonna shift and start happening. I want to be available in case there is a need and we can help out.
Other states, including Florida and Georgia, have also passed or are considering legislation requiring law enforcement agencies seek 287G agreements. 3 months into President Trump's second term, ICE had signed more than 450 agreements in 38 states. By then, Texas had the second most agreements in the country, with more than 70 and another 10 pending. There has been criticism over the years that the 287G program lacks transparency. A recent ACLU report called on participating agencies to better track and address complaints about racial profiling and other civil rights violations. Separately, a congressional bill filed this year by Texas Representative Michael Cloud calls for several improvements to the 287G program, including publishing yearly reports to track its success. Officials have also been discussing how to make the training shorter and more regional, which could further cut expenses, along with any grant program here in Texas that might be available. And ICE also reminds agencies it pays for their training, but not necessarily the other costs associated with it. More about that in this story online.